Hi everyone, this is Miss Duval. I am not going to be with you today, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday because I'm giving the end of course exams. However, the show must go on. So today we are going to move on in our modern contemporary time period. We are going to look at the drama part, which will be musicals. So on your learning target sheet for Monday, write down your learning target, discuss the contributions Rodgers and Hammerstein made on American musicals. These are two fairly important men we will talk about today in the lecture, and you will see just what they did in their contributions towards the golden era of musicals. And you might not have known, but musicals are pretty much American, and so you'll learn that today as well. So do make sure that you get this down for Monday, April 30th on your learning target slide, and make sure that you answer it today because you will learn the information in the notes. So if everyone has this, we are going to move on with our notes. You should be giving a sheet of paper in which you will be filling in the blank. As far as in our notes, you're not going to write all of these notes down. So do pay attention. If you have your highlighters, get them out because I will be highlighting as long. So here we go. Music, like I said just a second ago, is strictly American. When its creation, it combines singing, dancing, and a script. The golden era of musicals was the 1940s. These are going to be the older classic ones that you might have heard of before, like Oklahoma, West Side Story, some of those that we'll look at. Since the musicals were so prevalent in America, eventually it will cross over and be European. This is the only time period that we've talked about where something that starts in America went over to Europe. Most of the previous time periods we talked about were things that had originated in Europe and then spread over to here. So musical theater has since spread to European countries, one of those being England. And we will look today at a English man who was responsible for a lot of huge musical hits. So if you got that, we're going to move on. Here's your learning target. So do pay attention. So Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein, you see their pictures here. Very important in the world of musicals. As you can see, influential, innovative, and successful. They were a team. They first started out working independently of one another, and then they met on a project, and then they started realizing that, hey, let's do this together. So Rodgers, who is pictured here, composed the music, and Hammerstein, pictured here, would write the lyrics. Once this team really got their chemistry together and started to crank out some musicals, you can see below a lot of their hits. So we have Oklahoma, Carousel, South Pacific, The King and I, and The Sound of Music. All of these are huge musicals today. They have been remade several times since the 1940s and 50s. And this is the musical team that is responsible for that. If you look at the next bullet, you can see that a lot of their shows have been turned into films, because most of these are films now. They won 34 Tony Awards, 15 Academy Awards, Pulitzer Prize, and 2 Grammys. If you are unsure or never heard about Tony Award, a Tony Award is the Broadway's or musicals Oscar. It is their top award, and they give it to actors, playwrights, anyone in the musical world that might perform on Broadway, which is in New York City. They are given a Tony Award, Academy Award. That's the Oscars, Pulitzer Prize, and 2 Grammys. And to earn a Grammy, if you know, that's music. So some of their songs that they actually wrote for their musicals were so good that they ended up winning 2 Grammys from them. So if we're good on this slide, let's move on to the next one. We're going to look at some musicals a little bit more in depth. I wanted you to see some of the things that have been created back during the golden age of musicals. This first one being South Pacific. It's actually from the book Tales of the South Pacific. There's a bunch of small tales in this book, and so the musical takes a little bit of a couple of these stories to get the musical. This too has been made into a movie. It originated on Broadway in 1949, and the movie version came out in 1958. It even won an Oscar for Best Sound. So that's one thing that South Pacific was good at, was their sound, their music. Interestingly enough, South Pacific was about race relations, which was really big during this time period, against, blacks and whites and segregation and things like that. So it's about an American nurse stationed at a U.S. naval base during World War II. World War II ended 1945, so it's still going to be something that was fresh in people's minds. She falls in love with a French plantation owner, so a typical love story, but it also still has a conflict because she struggles to accept his mixed race children. It is considered one of the greatest musicals out there. So maybe you haven't heard of it before, but it's actually a really good one. West Side Story. West Side Story hit Broadway in 1957. This is the Romeo and Juliet of the 1950s. It's an adaptation, which means they've changed it, but it's loosely based on Romeo and Juliet. What it is you've got two families that are kind of like worlds apart, in the sense that one is a white group and one is a Puerto Rican group, and they come from two different areas of New York City, and they're fighting and they're in gangs. So we also see some race relations, but there is a love story in here. The two gangs are going to be the Jets and the Sharks, and Riff is a character. He's one of the main guys in the Jets, and Bernardo, one of the main guys for the Sharks. So they're going to be feuding with each other. Tony and Riff will be two people that will kind of, stand up for their gang. And the problem here is where you see the love aspect of the musical is that Tony falls in love with Maria, who is Bernardo's sister. And Bernardo, if you remember from the bullet before, is a shark. So there's going to be issues there. And here's some pictures where you can see some images, some scenes from the movie West Side Story. It's a really good musical. I was going to show it, but it seemed like a lot of you had already seen it in a previous class. So, The Sound of Music. So many people have probably seen The Sound of Music that I didn't want to watch it again, even though it is probably one of the best musicals out there. Definitely one of the most successful musicals that was ever made. It is clearly my favorite of all the musicals from the older generation. I have the DVDs, the VHS tapes, the soundtrack. I have all of it. This was Rodgers and Hammerstein's last musical that they worked on together. It is based on a true story of the Von Trapp family, which was a family who lived in Austria, Vienna, Austria, and during World War II. They were Nazi occupied, and they were trying to get out The dad had been successful in the military, but he didn't want to be part of the military anymore under Nazi control. The musical will hit Broadway in 1959. The film version, which is widely successful, comes out in 1965. I told you it was very successful, wins 5 Oscars, produces more hit songs than any other Rodgers and Hammerstein's, and it's very financially successful. This was one of Julie Andrews' most memorable films. That's her right there. And sometimes you'll see the whole cast reunite on TV shows. I think they were on Oprah a few years ago. And in fact, they were actually on the Talk, which is a afternoon TV show. They were on the Talk last week, talking about the making of Sound of the Music and how they got along and things from behind the scenes. This person right here is Andrew Lloyd Webber. He is widely famous in the musical world. Present day, he is British. And a lot of Broadway shows, musicals that we've seen here recently were credited to him. So several of his musicals have run for more than a decade. That's really a good thing. If you are so well at what you do, which is writing and composing and doing the lyrics and coming up with the whole singing, dancing, and script, and it all come together, then your musical is going to be successful. And they will run on Broadway in New York City or in the West End, which is in London, where he was from. And then they will end up touring the country. And many musicals will end up touring the countries, and that's why if you go downtown to the Kentucky Center for the Arts, you might have seen the Broadway series, and some of these shows have come through. So some of his long-running musicals were Cats, which you see a picture down here. He overall, so far, he is still alive. So far, he's composed 13 musicals. And you can see some of his honors listed below. One being a knighthood, which means it's actually Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber. Tony, Grammys, Academy Awards, Golden Globe. And Golden Globe, that's TV. So he's done a little bit of everything. Some of his other musicals, Evita, Phantom of the Opera, which is was made famous a few years ago because it came to movie. Jesus Christ Superstar, Joseph, and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. So widely famous, very successful British composer with musicals. So as you see, this will conclude our lesson for today.